Hey guys, this is your makeup on communication from Online Proxys. Several of you had to miss it, so I retaped it here. It's a little bit of a review. Sorry to be so slow getting back to you. I actually taped it, and I didn't realize I had to do it in 15-minute increments to get it on YouTube. And I think I did an hour's, and I just now getting back to it. So I apologize. We actually do have one more session for you guys, though, which it'd be nice if we could try to finish it up because you deserve it, you paid for it, and all that. So I'm going to do this in about 10 to 15 minute increments. I'm going to do two pieces now, and I'm going to save the other half as the second course. And I think I'm just going to tape it, send it to you, and we'll schedule a time for some Q&A and finish her up here because you guys deserve it. Okay? I think some of you owe for the second half, but we'll just pass on it, give it to you for free because of the difficulties getting this scheduled. Haven't had that kind of problem before. So, okay, let's talk about communication quickly. When we talk about communication, what we're really talking about, and is often misunderstood, is we're talking about passing pictures on. The way our mind works is words aren't floating around in our head. We see pictures of things, or we see visions of activities, or we project our emotions out through our words. But they're all generally pictures of things that we see that are unseen. And words are creative. Words create environments, and from the scriptures we see that God created by His word out of fiat creation. It is through words that God speaks. In fact, I view prayer as a continuation of the creation process in the world. It isn't mostly our hurling up shortages and scarcity to God for Him to answer. It's really a dialogue where we with God and the Holy Spirit create further in creation. That's why Jesus said, "In that time you'll ask what you will, and it will be done for you," because you'll be asking as a process of partnership with God. Words are powerful because they create realities and they stand for realities. For example, if I said I am cold, I'm throwing those words out in the air in the form of codes. Words are codes. They're like programming. And you take this word, I think I'm cold in here, you hurl that out. Hopefully it hits your ears, and you can feel. You actually visualize what I mean by cold. I can say I'm looking outside and snow is 2 feet deep here in Florida, and it's cold. These words are hurled out, they hit your ear, and you imagine the same thing. But if you live in the tip of South America or the heart of the Congo, you're a villager, you've never seen snow, and you've never experienced cold, my codes don't tell you anything. And that's when communication gets difficult. Good communication is choosing the codes that best transfer the pictures in your mind to the other person's ears. And it takes gear. And anybody who's tried to communicate knows it takes great skill. Even in marriages, jobs, singing, preaching, selling, those codes, those words are tricky little buggers. It takes a little bit to make them work. But as leaders and ministers, we deal in words, so we should be above average dealing with them. So we've got it down. It's codes. Words are codes. Words are codes. Words are always also supernatural. Language, by its very nature, is really supernatural, and people don't often get that. One of the evidences of that is language itself. Most often, because of evolution, we thought, well, everything's getting better over time. But in fact, it's not. The principle of entropy works in cultures, it works in languages, and sometimes even theology. That means things break down and they begin to fly apart. Language, as we know it, is, interestingly enough, more complex and more broad the more ancient it is. For example, in the Amazon, there are countless words for barks that little children know that we could probably never remember because our brains as Westerners have been, we might say, dumbed down to handle a limited scope of language. So we do know by our studies and research out there, linguists know that the more ancient the communication, the more complex it is. More words, syntax is a little harder. Chinese is actually the most contemporary language when you get down to it. It basically is written and communicated like baby talk, and their minds fill in what someone's talking about. The Chinese language is really expressed for the purposes of economy. Maybe someday, within 2 or 3 or 4 generations, rather than English, China will be the primary language. It seems to be that that's the way language is going. Of course, English is experiencing the same thing. So, let's go now that we know what words are. Let's go now to how communication works. Communication, again, is the conveyance of emotion, pictures, experiences from one mind to another. It is risky. The truth about communication, it rarely happens. Now, when you're communicating, you want to be aware of what some of the hurdles are as you communicate to people. For example, number one, fear. Every society, every group, every person, every family has a certain set of fears they're most prone to. Fears distort communication. If I'm afraid of you, I can't hear you at all. If I'm afraid of harm, I'm going to be very cynical, very careful. If I have fear of money and you're asking me to give money, I have fears to get through. What happens here is there's part of your brain called the amygdala. Thoughts go into the amygdala, emotions and everything else, and pictures. And if they make it past that, they go one of two ways. They go to your neocortex, which begins to process the words accurately and thoughtfully toward application. If it doesn't make it there, the negativity of it will take it into your reptilian brain or your limbic system, which is geared toward fight or flight and fear. It's geared to save your life. So if I'm communicating, if I don't neutralize someone's fears, it is very likely what I want to say will never get through that. And that's what happens in close relationships where fears have been able to build up. And so when you're communicating to different people, you want to kind of, in your notes, anticipate what fears they will have. I encourage you to do that. I do that. I look at my topic and I figure what kinds of fears could people have. Let's take the copy of abortion. I won't ever talk about abortion publicly unless I have about 2 or 3 hours or an hour and a half at least to describe what I don't mean by my criticism and then move to why I'm in disagreement. The reason is about half the women have had abortions and they fear rejection. Maybe they don't fear it at all. A lot of people don't. They don't feel guilty at all, but they do fear you making them feel guilty. A lot of them, have never gotten over it. So you need to know when you approach topics, you've got to anticipate how you will neutralize fear. And sometimes you actually can't. So you need to make the fear work for you. That's just the way it goes. Now, many religious monikers are taken and they use fear to motivate people. Fear is not a legitimate emotion to get people to do anything. It's destructive at that level. But many religions are built around fear. Many politics are built around fear. We're in a political season now, and they're trying to motivate people with fear of the Mexican border, fear of the economy. It's all fear to motivate you to vote for them. So, but if you're a communicator and you want to pass on health, you have to neutralize fear. 2, you got to watch out for past experience. It really is true. Sometimes when you get up to speak, you may remind someone of a bad experience they had in their past, and you're going to have trouble getting past it. So you want to know a little bit about the experience of the people that you're talking to. What are they geared to? 3, jumping to conclusion is a hurdle you have to go through, meaning people can think because you used words that are similar to someone else, they know what you mean when you're halfway through. You have to keep people from jumping to conclusions. You have to use novelty, backdoor your way in sometimes, just to, have a open slate where you can get your pictures from your mind into theirs. That's just the way communication has to go. 4, motivation. People are motivated differently, and you can find out what motivates people when they speak. For example, talking as an employer to staff or people, you need to realize that money doesn't motivate the majority of people. About 80% of people are motivated by what we would call intrinsic value or intrinsic motivations, which mean they do it for the sheer joy and fun of it. You have to find out what makes it fun for them if you're going to communicate to them. 5, paradigms. Paradigms are structures wherein we use words, mentalities, and attitudes to define the reality of the worlds we live in. For example, let's take the word pastor. Pastor is a word that's interesting from one tradition to the next. The Catholic Church, we're talking about a priest, usually always single, who does Mass and that kind of thing. In a Southern Baptist setting, a pastor is primarily a sermon giver. So when you use the word pastor, you got to figure out what do people think of these things. 6, people have agendas. They're sometimes listening to you to actually motivate you in their direction. So they come with lists that they already want to see happen, and when you don't hit that agenda, you're going to lose the communication there. So sometimes you want to try and discern what could be some folks' agenda here. What do they really want from this? And address that. Talk about it. 7, needs. People have needs. And in our culture, having needs is a horrible thing. You gotta get your needs met. Isn't that way with the rest of the world? But you want to kind of get a feel for what do people have as their perceived needs you can talk to. You'll get their ear if you hit that the quickest. Basically, I need to throw this in. You got about 10, 15 seconds to deal with these things sometimes. Maybe a minute. 8, distractions will get to you. People can be distracted by troubles at home, the job, the workplace. To be a good communicator, you draw people from their distractions. Contemporary worship for a time used to do that. We used to call it get people from the parking lot to the scriptures. And we try to get people away from their distractions. The use of humor is a terrific way to do that as an opener for a message. That's why a lot of great speakers will do that. Well, let's pause now, and you listen to that much, spend a little time thinking about it, and I'll be back with the second portion.